Welcome back to Fatal Files. I'm Nathan Cole, and for today's episode, I will show you what happens when male Karens push the wrong strangers entirely too far. From a drunk heckler who tried to humiliate a retired fighter inside a packed karaoke bar, to a furious park bully whose obsession with controlling a chess table ended in a bizarre, fatal twist. It was March 14, 2015, at a crowded resto bar near the shipping docks in Cebu, Philippines. A regional basketball tournament had just ended, so the place was packed with exhausted workers, players, and regulars. It had the kind of atmosphere where you could already tell somebody was eventually going to start a fight. One of the patrons that night was Randy Castro, 48. He worked as a warehouse supervisor, and by all accounts, he was a guy who liked to be in control. But his personal life was a bit messy. He was going through a tough separation, having issues at work, and regulars noticed he'd been drinking heavily and looking for fights. That night, he was sitting right by the stage, getting visibly annoyed with the karaoke, saying it's too noisy and crowded. Meanwhile, sitting on the opposite side of the room was 63-year-old Lito Mamek, though everyone just called him Tade Lito. Now, back in the day, Lito was actually a regional boxing champion, but you'd never guess it by looking at him. Severe arthritis had slowed him down quite a bit, and these days, he just quietly got by working late-night cleaning jobs. He kept entirely to himself, sitting silently in the corner for a good hour before he finally decided to get up and head toward the stage. Around 11:10 p.m., Lito got up to sing a rock song. He wasn't a rock star, but he was screaming it out and doing his best to hit those high, loud notes. Right away, Randy started heckling him from his plastic stool, loudly mocking his singing over the heavy guitar tracks. Lito just ignored him and kept on with the song, but Randy wouldn't let it go. He climbed onto the low wooden stage with a beer bottle still hanging from one hand and ripped the microphone straight out of Lito's grip mid-song, causing a burst of loud feedback through the speakers. People nearby started turning in their seats immediately as Randy staggered around the stage, mocking Lito's accent and exaggerated singing while laughing at him. When Lito tried to get the mic back, Randy shoved him into a speaker stand. The metal frame rattled loudly and nearly tipped over. Lito didn't swing back. He raised both hands chest high, trying to calm things down while backing away from him. Instead, Randy stepped closer until they were nearly chest to chest, screaming over the karaoke music while beer splashed from the bottle onto the stage floor. Then, without warning, Randy swung his hand across and slapped Lito hard enough to snap his head sideways. And that's when a boxer's instinct took over. Lito slipped the slap, pivoted, and countered with a short, quick right hook, a classic boxer's reflex, just trying to get the guy off him. It landed flush along Randy's jaw with a dull crack that several people near the stage later said they could actually hear over the karaoke music. Randy's legs buckled instantly, and he stumbled backward, completely losing his footing. He tried reaching for the speaker stand with one hand, but missed completely. The back of his heel slid off the stage first before his entire body dropped backward onto the concrete below. He fell right off the side of the stage, and the back of his skull hit the bare concrete floor. The impact was sickening. The entire bar went dead silent instantly. Randy was just lying there on the ground, twitching, as blood started pooling on the floor. Emergency services were called immediately, and paramedics got there after several minutes, but the damage was done. Paramedics later found Randy unconscious and breathing irregularly before rushing him to the hospital in critical condition. Randy went into a coma and passed away the next afternoon. When the medical examiner looked into it, they found that the punch didn't kill him. It was the concrete floor. The fall caused a fractured skull and massive brain swelling. In the end, after interviewing over 20 witnesses and watching the bar's security tapes, the police didn't file any charges against Lito. It was clear he was just defending himself. It's just a sobering reminder of how fast a stupid bar argument can spiral. One guy couldn't handle his liquor or his temper, and it ended up costing him his life over a karaoke song. Later on, the bar actually padded the edges of the stage and changed their rules, but that's what a terrible price to pay for a lesson learned. What makes this next case worse for me is how something as stupid as traffic and ego turned a busy highway into the last place someone would ever stand. It was August 22nd in 2016 in Phoenix, and the afternoon heat was well over 100 degrees, making everyone miserable. Out on I-10, construction barrels squeezed traffic down to a single lane, causing a massive bumper-to-bumper backup. Everyone was stuck, crawling along, completely frustrated and totally on edge. Derek Black was 51, and he used to run his own contracting business. But after a bankruptcy and a divorce, he'd become incredibly bitter. His friends said he was obsessed with the idea that everyone was disrespecting him. He actually made a habit of filming people in traffic and posting the arguments online like he was some kind of internet hero. Personally, I could say he has a main character syndrome and loved cornering people just to make them look bad. That day, he was stuck behind Harold Boone, a 67-year-old retired Army Ranger who used to teach restraint techniques to security guards. Harold was driving an old truck full of irrigation gear. At one point, Harold swerved just an inch over the lane line to avoid a construction barrel. He corrected it right away, but Derek absolutely snapped. He went full Karen mode, aggressively tailgating him, slamming on his horn, and holding his phone up to the window to film Harold while driving like a maniac. As traffic slowed near the construction merge, vehicles were eventually forced off Interstate 10 and onto the frontage road because of lane closures ahead. Cars stacked bumper to bumper approaching the next intersection, where a long red light stopped traffic completely. When traffic finally ground to a halt at a red light on the frontage road, Derek threw a total temper tantrum. He parked his SUV right in the middle of the road, left his door wide open, and marched back to Harold's truck with his phone recording like he was capturing a crime. He started throwing a fit, shouting insults, and literally kicking the side of Harold's truck door. When that didn't get the reaction he wanted, he began violently pounding on the glass, screaming at Harold through the windshield, and then yanked the driver's side door wide open. Witnesses said Harold stayed in his seat and tried to wave him off, telling him to calm down, but Derek wasn't letting it go. He reached into the cab, holding a metal baseball bat he had grabbed from his SUV, and lunged at Harold, screaming threats. Drivers in nearby lanes later said Derek was halfway inside the truck at that point, swinging the bat wildly through the doorway while Harold tried to shield himself against the steering wheel. One witness said the bat struck the dashboard hard enough to crack part of the plastic panel near the gauges. Another driver reported hearing Harold yell after Derek raised the bat again near his head. Fearing for his life with an aggressive stranger violently forcing his way into his truck with a weapon, Harold reached for the handgun he kept in his console and fired once, hitting Derek in the chest. The shot hit Derek high in the upper torso at close range. Witnesses said his body instantly jerked backward from the doorway before he lost his footing on the oily pavement beside the median. Derek stumbled backward out of the doorway, dropping the bat, and collapsed onto the pavement beside the median. The loud pop of the gunshot instantly stopped traffic. Derek was lying there, gasping for air, as drivers jumped out of their cars to help. Several witnesses later described seeing blood rapidly soaking through his shirt, while Harold remained inside the truck, visibly shaken, still holding the handgun pointed downward near his lap. Someone called 911, and paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but the bullet had done too much internal damage. He passed away shortly after arriving. When the police looked at the evidence, including the video on Derek's own phone, it was clear as day. Derek was the aggressor. He had illegally forced his way into Harold's truck and assaulted him with a deadly weapon. Prosecutors didn't file any charges against Harold, ruling the shooting as a clear case of self-defense. When detectives looked into Derek's social media, they found a history of these road rage videos. It was always the same thing, him bullying strangers over minor driving mistakes. It's honestly just sad and chilling. Now, this next story really got under my skin because it proves how quickly grown adults can completely lose control over something as meaningless as gym equipment. It was November 7th, 2017, inside a gym in Riverside, California, during the chaotic after-work rush. The place was absolutely slammed with college kids and people straight from the office, all fighting over the same equipment. The free weight area was a total mess with heavy plates and gym bags scattered everywhere on the floor, making it a complete safety hazard. Carl Mendez was one of the regulars. He was 49 and used to be a competitive bodybuilder back in the day. But his life had hit a rough patch, injuries ended his heavy lifting, and his personal training business dried up. The gym was basically all he had left, but he acted like he owned the place. He'd hover around the squat racks for hours, staring down the younger members like they were trespassing in his backyard. It's sad, really, how Carl just can't let go of his past. That evening, a 36-year-old powerlifter named Dana Mercer was using the center squat rack. She also happened to teach women's self-defense, but she was just there to get her workout done. Carl marched over during her rest break and started complaining that she was taking too long. Dana calmly told him she only had 2 sets left and turned back to her workout. Carl couldn't handle that. Witnesses later said he started pacing around, trash-talking her out loud, and then actually kicked her water bottle right across the floor. Talk about a very petty and childish behavior. Several gym members later said Carl kept circling closer between her sets, like he was trying to intimidate her into leaving. He slammed weight plates onto a nearby rack just to get her attention while muttering insults loud enough for half the free weight section to hear. The tension got so noticeable that a few people stopped lifting and started watching from nearby benches. Once Dana finished her set and racked the weights, Carl stepped right into her face. Someone actually started filming on their phone as Carl reached out and grabbed her arm to pull her away from the rack. Witnesses said Dana tried stepping away to create distance, but Carl kept advancing chest to chest while yelling about the rack. The phone footage later showed him jerking her arm hard enough to throw her balance off briefly before she pulled free. Several people nearby started shouting at Carl to back off, but he kept moving forward anyway. Dana didn't panic. She broke his grip, planted her feet, and shoved him away to get some breathing room. It wasn't even a crazy hard push, but Carl was already off balance. As he stumbled backward, his heel caught a 45-pound weight plate that someone had carelessly left on the floor. The plate rolled slightly under his shoe as his upper body continued backward. Witnesses later said his arms flailed for balance, but there was nothing behind him except the bench. His lower back struck the edge first, twisting his body sideways, and a split second later, the side of his neck slammed directly into the exposed steel adjustment rail near the corner of the bench. He hit the floor fully conscious, but within seconds, he was telling people he couldn't move or feel anything below his neck. Witnesses later said his arms and legs stayed completely still while he struggled to breathe. They called emergency services immediately, and he was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. The impact had literally broken his neck and severely damaged his spinal cord. Doctors later found the injury had disrupted the upper part of his spinal cord, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down and causing catastrophic swelling that affected his breathing overnight. He passed away the very next morning. After checking the gym's security cameras and the phone video, the police didn't file any charges against Dana. It was obvious Carl started the whole thing, and she was just defending herself. The gym ended up changing its layout and clearing out the clutter, but for a long time, nobody wanted to use that center rack because everyone remembered exactly what happened there. For me, this next case is probably the most frustrating so far because all of it started over a public spot that nobody even cared about until one man decided he owned it. Honestly, after researching these cases, it's crazy how every single one started with something small that should have been ignored. So if you're enjoying the video so far, drop a like, subscribe, and let me know which case shocked you the most. It was June 3, 2014, out by Lake Coeur d'Alene in Idaho. The morning was chilly and damp, with a thick mist rising off the lake and boat spray leaving the public wooden dock incredibly slick. Only a few guys were out there fishing in the cold air when Norm Baxter walked down, looking for a fight. Norm was 55 and used to run a local plumbing business, but after a messy fallout with his partners, he sold it and just became incredibly bitter. His neighbors said he was totally paranoid. He started nailing homemade no trespassing signs to trees, taking photos of people's license plates, and harassing anyone who came near the dock, even though it was 100% public property. Honestly, it feels like he was just looking for reasons to be angry. That morning, 62-year-old Leonard Red Elk pulled up to fish. Leonard was a retired high school wrestling coach from Montana who spent years mentoring kids. He had a bad knee and moved slowly, but he just wanted a quiet spot to relax. The dock was slick from lake mist and boat spray, and several old steel mooring cleats along the edge were badly rusted. One near the corner had partially broken loose, leaving a jagged metal rod exposed above the wood. Leonard was fixing his bait when Norm marched down, filming him on his phone and accusing him of trespassing. Leonard calmly pointed to the county sign and tried ignoring him, but Norm kept pacing around, ranting about outsiders. Then, Norm took it way too far. He reached down, grabbed Leonard's fishing line while continuing to shout, and snapped it right in half. Leonard stood up and stepped back to keep his cool, but Norm stepped right into his space and shoved him hard in the chest. Norm wasn't done. He swung a wild punch at Leonard's head. Because of his wrestling background, Leonard's instincts instantly took over. He ducked under the punch and forcefully drove forward to stop the attack, wrapping Norm around the waist and pushing him backward across the wet dock boards instead of simply backing away. The The moment Leonard drove into him, both men slid several feet across the slick wood, almost like they were on ice. Witnesses fishing nearby later said Norm's shoes completely lost traction as his heels skidded through the water and algae coating the dock surface. Leonard was still trying to control him and stop the swing when their combined weight crashed sideways toward the damaged corner section. Both men lost balance almost immediately on the slick dock. Witnesses later said Leonard still had hold of Norm when they crashed sideways near the damaged cleat. Norm's lower back and abdomen slammed onto the exposed steel anchor rod protruding beside the dock, and the metal penetrated deep into his stomach. Norm immediately went limp as the air left his lungs. Leonard immediately let go and tried pulling him away from the exposed rod while nearby fishermen rushed over with towels and life jackets. Blood spread rapidly between the dock boards and dripped directly into the water beneath them. Emergency services were called immediately, but the metal rod had punctured vital organs, causing massive, uncontrollable internal bleeding. Norm passed away at the hospital that evening. The medical examiner confirmed that the severe internal damage and blood loss from the puncture wound is what killed him. Investigators later reviewed witness statements and cell phone footage from nearby boaters. Prosecutors ultimately ruled that Leonard acted in lawful self-defense because Norm initiated the assault, and the fatal injury resulted primarily from the hazardous dock conditions rather than an intentional attempt to seriously injure him. No charges were filed against Leonard, and somehow this final story feels even sadder to me because an ordinary afternoon in a park turned deadly over a chess table that was already being given up anyway. It was April 19, 2018, in downtown Sacramento, and it was a warm, bright afternoon at Cesar Chavez Plaza. The park was filled with the usual lunchtime crowd, office workers eating outside, buses rushing by, and retirees playing chess under the trees. It felt completely normal, but the heat and the crowds had everyone a little impatient. The guy causing the trouble was 52-year-old Hector Ruiz. He used to do maintenance work, but after getting laid off, evicted, and falling into heavy drinking, he basically started living out of public parks. Hector's neighbors said that he'd pick fights with strangers over benches, blast music, and get right in people's faces until they backed down. He was just a bully looking for a reaction. That afternoon, 74-year-old Wei Chen was sitting quietly under the trees, setting up a concrete chess table. Wei had moved to California in the 80s and spent decades teaching judo to kids. He had bad arthritis and moved slowly, but his former students always said he was the most patient, gentle guy. Hector walked into the plaza already in a bad mood after getting into an argument with a bus driver earlier on. He saw Wei at the chess table and started yelling that he was taking up too much space. Wei didn't want any trouble. He just nodded, packed up his chess pieces into a bag, and prepared to leave. But Hector wouldn't let it go. He leaned over the table and aggressively swept the remaining chess pieces across the concrete. Plastic pieces scattered under benches and rolled toward the sidewalk, while several bystanders immediately yelled at him to stop. But Wei still didn't fight back. He crouched slowly because of his arthritis, picked up only a few pieces near his shoes, then started walking away toward the sidewalk, carrying the partially open bag against his chest. But that actually triggered Hector and followed him, screaming about respect and public space while getting closer with every step. Witnesses later said Wei kept trying to angle his body away and continue walking, but Hector repeatedly moved into his path instead of letting him leave. Then, Hector suddenly reached out from behind, grabbed the front collar of Wei's lightweight jacket, and yanked him backwards so violently that the stitching near the shoulder ripped apart with a loud, tearing sound. Wei nearly lost his footing as the pull jerked him sideways toward the tables again. And that's when Wei's decades of martial arts training just automatically kicked in. He didn't punch or kick Hector. He simply reacted the way his body had been conditioned for years to react under pressure. According to the police report, Wei turned his hips slightly while trapping Hector's grabbing arm against his body to break the grip and create separation. The movement itself was quick and compact, barely looking forceful at all. But Hector had already lunged forward so aggressively that the sudden redirection of his own momentum him sent him stumbling sideways toward the concrete seating area. His feet crossed awkwardly as he tried regaining balance. One hand reached toward the bench instinctively, but his shoulder clipped the edge first, throwing his upper body sideways. The side of his head then struck the concrete support beneath the table with a heavy impact that several nearby witnesses later said they clearly heard across the plaza. Hector immediately dropped onto the pavement, motionless. For a few seconds, several bystanders thought he had simply been knocked out from the fall. Then blood started running from his left ear onto the concrete while his breathing turned uneven and wet-sounding. Way reportedly backed away several feet, still holding the torn section of his jacket while staring at Hector on the ground. Someone called 911 right away, and paramedics got him to the trauma center within 6 minutes. But the damage to his skull and brain was too severe from hitting the concrete edge. Hector passed away that evening without ever waking up. When the police watched the phone videos recorded by bystanders, it was an open and shut case. Hector was the one who attacked, and Way was purely defending himself. The state didn't file any charges against Way, though, sadly, his friends said he was so shaken up he stopped coming to the park altogether. It's just incredibly sad. A man lost his life, and an innocent elderly man was traumatized, all because someone wanted to start a fight over a chess table that nobody else was even using.